Hello whisky fans, I think it's time that we did a review of a Flora and Fauna release. So today we're going to be taking a look at Linkwood 12-year-old. So I've decided to go with Linkwood because not only do they make really good whisky, but it's also one of the key components in the Compass Box Orchard House that I've just reviewed. Depending on which batch of the Compass Box Orchard House you get, it's possibly the largest contributor at well over a third of the cask breakdown. So, as I mentioned, Linkwood 12-year-old is a Diageo distillery, and Linkwood is part of the Flora and Fauna range. So the Flora and Fauna range was created by United Distillers, which was Diageo's predecessor, and the Flora and Fauna range was intended as a little behind-the-scenes look at a lot of the distilleries that were, without being mean about it, they were blend fodder distilleries. A lot of them are the blend fodders that go into products like Johnnie Walker for Diageo. And for a lot of the distilleries released under this Flora and Fauna range, a lot of them, it was the only way to try whisky from that distillery. For a lot of the Flora and Fauna distilleries, it still is. Flora and Fauna range has now been around since, I think, the early 90s. And it has changed a bit over the years, actually. Some distilleries that were originally in the Flora and Fauna range are no longer in the range because the distillery was sold to somebody else. Some distilleries like Clynelish and Kalila are no longer in the range because they were given their own proper official bottlings. And sadly, some distilleries like Rosebank were removed from the range because the distillery was closed. In the past, some of the Flora and Fauna range were offered as cask strength options. Now, I believe they're all 43%, and all of them they're all age statement whiskies to Diageo's credit, and they're all at least 10 years old. Interesting little trivia about Flora and Fauna bottlings is, even though it's what everyone knows them by, and it's even what they're specified as when you look on online websites, online retailers, even Diageo's malts.com website, they all refer to these bottlings as Flora and Fauna. But if you look at the box and the label, I think I'm right in saying that you'll never actually see the words Flora and Fauna on the label or the box. And that's because Flora and Fauna was the unofficial name that was created by whiskey writer Michael Jackson. No, not that one. Because each distillery in the Flora and Fauna range has its own Scottish flora or fauna as its kind of little mascot on the label. So I think that's a really nice little touch. A little bit of terroir perhaps, a little bit of the place where the whisky is made being featured on the label, and also the Scottish taking a little bit of national pride in their nature. So in the case of Linkwood, I'm pretty sure that that is a pair of swans on the label. I'll let you have a look at the rest of the blurb on the label. You can pause that and have a look if you want, but the main things are, it's 43%. It's 43%, it's 12 years old, it's a Speyside whisky. It's worth mentioning that this is, as I said, one of the key components in the Compass Box Orchard House, but at 43% it's 3% weaker than the Compass Box. I would say that the colour of this is probably is unnaturally coloured. There's probably some caramel in there, but probably not too much considering this is 12 years old. I'd also say that it's almost certainly chill filtered, so it's not a craft presentation like the Compass Box, although it does have an age statement. And that age statement is older than we know the Compass Box Orchard House to be, because we know, if we read between the lines on the Compass Box Orchard House, I believe, depending on which component you look at, it's between 6 and 10 years old. So this whisky, all of it, is 2 years older than the oldest component in the Compass Box Orchard House. As for a price, I did a price check. I've had this one for a while. I did a price check before I did this review, and I'm seeing prices around about the £45 to £50 mark for this. So for 43%, that's a little bit pricey, but not too bad. But it does also mean that it's slightly more expensive than the Compass Box Orchard House for worse specs on paper. Let's not let that put us off too much though. Let's get some in the glass. Horrible composite cork. Let's get some in the glass and see what it's like. And obviously, is it better than the Compass box? It's interesting that these Flora and Fauna releases, I think they all used to come in wooden boxes, and then they moved to these cardboard boxes, which are fine. A lot of them now don't come with any box at all. And a little part of me does always think that it's possibly only a matter of time until these Flora and Fauna bottlings disappear. Because I feel like we're kind of lucky to have them. The fact that Diageo have made all of these distilleries that a lot of other companies wouldn't have made available at all, because it's just their blend stock. They're well within their rights to not offer it as an official bottling if it's just for their blends. But to Diageo's credit, they've done that, they've made it available, and it's been available for a really long time. I do think that we're lucky to have these expressions. But I imagine that Diageo probably don't make that much money off doing things like this compared to just sticking it in bottles of Johnnie Walker. So how long we'll continue to be able to buy this stuff is anyone's guess. So Linkwood 12 on the nose. I think you can definitely see the influence of this Linkwood or Linkwood like this in the Compass Box blend. Just like the Compass Box Orchard House, this is a very sweet whiskey, getting lots of notes of sweet caramel on the nose of this, toffee apple, also getting some notes of, also getting a little note of Werther's Originals. So you could say that the nose on this one is uncommonly good. Also getting a really interesting note of slightly yeasty beer on the nose of this. So it's, to its credit, it's got some character. It's not a dumbed down, sweet, Speyside sort of non-event. It's got a little bit more going on. Slight metallic note, lots of apple peel and grassy hay notes, and a decent amount of maltiness. So Linkwood 12, let's see how it tastes. Must say that I think this is a really well made, stereotypical, kind of textbook, youngish, decent Speyside single malt. On the palate I'm getting some more apples, more of a dull green apple note. It's not as sharp and juicy and vibrant as the Compass Box Orchard House, but I think that's probably largely due to the fact that this is significantly older than the Compass Box. In particular, I'm getting some notes of like buttery caramel and some really nice honeyed malt notes. Things that to me really scream that this has had a few more extra years in the cask. So although it's not got the fresh, vibrant notes of the Compass Box, it has something in exchange for them. Also getting some nice confectionery notes on the palate of this one. Some lemon and apple flavoured sweets. Going to have one more sip and look at the finish. As for the finish, reasonably light but not an enormous problem. Nice amount of malt and dry oakiness, and also some sweetened tea notes. I think that you might be able to tell from my notes and how many notes I've done on the nose and the palate for this one. I do think that this is a whiskey that noses a little bit better than it tastes, and that's something that I often find on whiskies that are perhaps slightly underpowered. I think that at 43% this whiskey is slightly underpowered, but to the credit of Diageo, they didn't screw us with a flat 40%. And it hasn't ruined the whiskey. I think that 43% is just about workable. Compared to the Compass Box, I think that this Linkwood 12, it's not as fresh or as fruity as the Compass Box. I think that it's got slightly worse body and slightly worse intensity. I actually think that it's slightly simpler too, but it does have the benefit of that extra age. But I think that at kind of £45, I think that this is a really nice, semi-affordable little 12-year-old whiskey. As for a grade, I'm going to go with a B- on this one, so that's the lower end of very good. And to its credit, I really do think that you can see a lot of the influence that this Linkwood 12, even though it's not a standout flavour, it's not heavily peated or it's not got any extremely odd or unusual flavours about it, but you can still see its influence in that Compass Box blended malt. But saying that, I do think that the Compass Box probably has a little bit more depth, and I personally, and this is probably slightly unusual for me, I prefer the freshness offered by that younger Compass Box blended malt. Why does the Compass Box have that additional depth and complexity? Whether it's from skillful blending, that extra 3% ABV, I have a feeling it's probably a mixture of the two. To Linkwood's credit though, Linkwood is a great distillery, and this Linkwood Flora and Fauna release is an excellent whisky that is worth buying. I think that it's a very well made little single malt. It's just that little bit more rounded and fudgy and sort of slightly more over blended than the Compass Box. And I think the most damning part of this whisky isn't any flaw that it has of itself. I think that it's the fact that it's kind of £5 to £10 more expensive than the Compass Box now makes it that little bit more of a questionable buy over the Compass Box. Although, bottom line, they're both very good whiskies and they're both worth a purchase. So, I hope you've enjoyed watching this. Let me know in the comments what you think of Linkwood. What do you think of the Flora and Fauna range? What's your favourite and least favourite? Let's make it interesting. Least favourite of the Flora and Fauna range. Thanks for watching, and cheers.